Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On the Sidelines. My name is Matthew Limberti,
And I'm Benedict Rhodes.
and welcome to episode 16 of our series On the Sidelines. Ben, have you been getting up to anything exciting lately?
Not really. I'm just here in Hartford, Connecticut at Rensselaer Field, waiting for the TFC game to start in a couple weeks. But other than that, not much. What about you?
Yeah, not much for me. Just trying to enjoy as much as I can right now. I mean, we're in the off seasons for NHL and NBA, which we'll be discussing soon. But there still is NFL games to recap, which I'll get into right now. Actually, as our first topic. First, I'm going to start out by talking about the two AFC East teams, the top two AFC East teams that were, to say, impressive over the weekend. Starting out with the Bills and Seahawks game, with the Bills beating down Seattle 44-34. Um, Josh Allen, their quarterback, had 415 passing yards with 3 touchdowns. With Wilson, on the other hand, having 390 passing yards and two interceptions. And Seattle's defense for a lot of this year has been a concerning factor for their team, and of course they fell to 6-2, and the Bills go to 7-2 for the season. Ben, what did you think about the this game in general?
If you remember on episode 50 in last week, I said the Bills need to prove they're legit by beating a contender. And I think the Bills did just that. They beat the Seahawks, who many see as one of the better teams this year. Overall, Russell Wilson is being talked about as an MVP candidate. Um, so overall, I thought it was a pretty good game. I didn't watch the entire game, but from what I did saw, it was pretty entertaining. Uh, Josh Allen coming in clutch a couple times. Bills looking pretty good on both sides of the ball. Looks like they might be getting closer to their first AFC East title in a long time.
Yeah, for me, I've been like, other than those two losses that they took to, I think it was Tennessee and Kansas City, who I mean, they are contenders in the AFC too. So I mean, that is a reasonable way, like a reasonable thing, a way to lose or lose those two games. But I think other than those games, I think overall their quarterback Josh Allen has been impressive for the year. I think as you mentioned that they beat a contender this past weekend, and I think they put themselves up there at least to be like probably third or fourth, I'd say at best in the AFC, behind Pittsburgh and Kansas City right now. I mean, yeah, they've been just playing impressive football right now. And we'll see, like going down the road, how they fare. And I think, as you mentioned too, they're getting closer to their first AFC East title, but they have someone else behind their back who I'll just mention. Who I'll mention very soon. But yeah,
Also, I think a lot of the people have been talking about Russell Wilson as an MVP. I think it's time for people to start talking about Josh Allen in that conversation too. I think would the Bills be 7-2 without Josh Allen playing as well as he has been playing? I don't know. I don't know who their backup quarterback is, to be honest. um, so I think Josh Allen's been pretty critical to their success this year, and I think Bills fans hoping that continues for the rest of the season and hopefully beyond that too.
yeah. I mean, yeah, we'll see going down the road how they fare against more competition. But as I mentioned, the second place team in the AFC East who's chasing the Bills right now is the Miami Dolphins. They went out to Arizona on Sunday to face the Cardinals, who were 5-2 at the time, now 5-3 after they lost to Miami. It was, I mean, a battle against two young quarterbacks. I mean, just coming up in the NFL with Tua, of course, having a second start in the NFL, and Kyler in his second year in the NFL. Yeah, the second year. Just want to make sure. Um, Tua in the end had, I mean Murray had the better game than Tua, I would say, but I mean he got his second win in the NFL as the Dolphins went to 5-3 for the year. What did you think about the Dolphins game yesterday and putting them to 5-3 now?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I think Kyler Murray had the better game from an individual standpoint. But as you saw with Tua in his first start as well, like it doesn't necessarily matter if you have the best stats as long as your team wins, which is ultimately what matters. And I think Tua is 2-0 now, so yeah, ultimately that's what matters. Getting wins is more important than getting 700 passing yards or whatever. But um, I think questions are still going to be asked if the Dolphins should have moved on from Ryan Fitzpatrick so quickly. He was having a great start to his season. Would they have won those 2 games if Fitzpatrick was starting? Probably, or maybe anyway. But I like to think so. But again, Tua is finding a way to win games, which is what's important. He just needs to sort of get more into his comfort zone and start packing up the stats as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, yeah, I think as you mentioned, all that matters is that he got the win, and that matters in the end, of course, and in the standings, and possibly for the playoffs if they make it that far. But yeah, I think in general, just I mean, Tua already having his first 2 wins in the league is just impressive on itself. I think we gave him a lot of credit last week for facing Aaron Donald and the Rams defense, and now going out on Sunday and playing against a contender like the Cardinals just shows, I think, how high he can bring this team. And also, you brought up them leaving Fitzpatrick a little too early. I mean, I don't know for sure if he would have gotten these wins if he was the quarterback, but I mean, I mean, they both seem to be great quarterbacks, as Tua is showing in this past 2 games. So I mean, I don't think I think either way they'd probably be getting these wins.
Yeah, I think the benefit for Miami, I think it's sort of backing them up, is like the fact that they're still winning the games. Like if Tua had put up these same numbers, but they'd lost both games or lost one of the games even, the questions might have been asked about the decision more. But like I said, like for the Dolphins, they're 2-0 since Tua started his first game, so ultimately it's working.
Yeah, and just to mention too, I'm pretty sure the Dolphins have like a light schedule going forward. I mean,
Yeah,
right now they're 5-3 right now, so I mean they have a chance to like close the gap in with the Bills. I mean, their next games are against the Chargers, the Broncos, the Jets, the Bengals, and then Kansas City is their next tough game. So in like 4 weeks or so, like they're gonna have tough competition. So I mean, they have a chance to potentially be 9-3 at that in when they face the Chiefs. So I mean, that would be a pretty exciting a pretty exciting time to be a Dolphins fan, to say the least. But I mean, yeah, we'll see going forward.
I don't know about 9-3 to be honest. So that might be a bit much. I imagine they probably might lose at least one of those games. That's obviously entirely possible. Yeah, that'd be quite something.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. I mean, like I mentioned, their competition is not the best until Kansas City, so
Yeah.
which is mid-December. So we'll see. It would just be a crazy scenario to bring up.
Um, Another good matchup this weekend was battle of two of the better quarterbacks of all time. Drew Brees and Tom Brady faced off on Sunday night. Most expected the game to be pretty competitive, maybe a shootout between the two quarterbacks, but it wasn't. The Saints beat Tampa Bay 38-3, with Brees throwing 222 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. For 564 passing touchdowns for his career, which is now 3 more than Tom Brady. So he actually passed him against Tom Brady. And Brady had no touchdown passes and 3 interceptions. So Drew Brees not only did he pass Brady's record, but beat him convincingly in the actual game, Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was shocked as everybody that I mean, like I think it goes back to the Giants game for Tampa Bay, and like how bad they looked against New York. I mean, first of all, that should have been a beatdown, but like in the first half of the game they were down, then they had to fight back to win, and like I think it came down to like a 2 point conversion that was incomplete by the Giants, which I mean which made Tampa win by 2. But having said that, yeah, I think it just goes back, like their struggles go back to that game. And I mean, I wasn't expecting Brady to throw 3 interceptions and no touchdown passes last night. I think also we've underestimated the Saints this year. I don't think they've played up to their competition in the past couple of weeks. But I think last night, with the beatdown that they had against the Tampa Bay Bucks, I think it showed how they should be a contender in the NFC.
Yeah, it's definitely a statement of intent, I think, uh, by Drew Brees and the Saints. I think they're going to be battling it out the rest of the season for a playoff spot, and I think that might be the momentum change that the Saints needed, and the Bucks didn't need.
Yeah, I would also say like I mean right now the Saints have the lead in the NFC South. So I mean, bearing like any craziness like happening to the Saints, I think that they're pretty clear to win the NFC South right now. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if I'd say clear just yet, but they're definitely favorites in my eyes, I think.
Yeah. Um,
Um, so moving on to someone who is a favorite in their division, I think fair to say, the Pittsburgh Steelers are one other game. They're now 8-0, and now 2 games up on the Baltimore Ravens. They last night were down, I think, 19-9 at one point against the Dallas Cowboys. And if you look at how bad the Cowboys have been this year, that was certainly a surprise, I think, for many people. But the Steelers had a big fourth quarter, scored 15 points, and ended up taking this one 24-19. What did you think of that game and of Ben Roethlisberger leading his team to another win?
I mean, I was shocked even Dallas was even in that game. Like, I didn't expect them to even score 19 points against the Steelers. I mean, I think this is just a contender having a bad game. I mean, although I know the Steelers won the game, I think it was just like sort of a theme over the weekend, which I'll discuss very soon about, contenders having sort of bad games, I would say. I mean, this was like I would say this I mean, it was a win, as I mentioned, but it was kind of like, it was like a one and bad game for Steelers. But I mean, I give credit to them for now being 8-0 and the best in the AFC right now, or the best in the NFL, I should say, because no one else has a undefeated record right now. But yeah, I mean, give credit to the Steelers. They fought back and they ended up getting the win.
And Ben Roethlisberger went down just before halftime, I think. Looked like he was injured, and I think a lot of Steelers fans thought, like, oh, here we go again. Ben Roethlisberger was last year. They played a bunch of quarterbacks when Roethlisberger was hurt. Looked like he was hurt again, but he came back and helped score those 15 points in the fourth quarter. So the Steelers will be glad to see he's fine.
Yeah, I mean that would have been a terrible situation for Pittsburgh, and I don't think that they definitely didn't want something like that to happen, or else their season could have been done, or like they could have been in a bad situation. Um, as I mentioned, though, the Steelers, who are a contender in the NFL, did have a bad game, but also, as we just talked about, there were a couple of other contenders who had some bad games, to say the least. I mean, some got the win, some didn't. Um, if we just mentioned the Steelers, of course, who beat Dallas by 5 points. Also, Kansas City had a pretty, I mean, not rough game. I mean, I would say that Mahomes is great, and the offense is great, but their defense was concerning on Sunday as they beat Carolina 33-31. Probably someone they could have beat down more on, but as I mentioned, a contender having a meh game. Um, and then Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and also Seattle too, who lost over the weekend. I'm pretty sure. Oh yeah, and Tampa Bay too. Just to name a couple of teams who had a couple of or a bad game this past weekend, either with a win or a loss. But yeah, just to mention that. Um, Now that we're looking at the leagues or each conference as a whole, who would you say would be the best in the AFC and NFC after Week 9?
After week 9, I'm sticking with the Steelers in the AFC, 8-0. They that comeback win. I guess maybe the being down 19-9, I think it was a bit of a wake up call for them that they're not invincible. And I think once they got that wake up call, they looked really good, like the Steelers where they've looked the whole season. So I imagine they might continue that hot form going into the next couple of weeks. And so in the AFC for me, it's the Steelers again.
Yeah, for me, I'm sticking with Chiefs still, although they just barely beat Carolina over the weekend, who they probably could have beaten down, just like the Steelers could have beaten down the Cowboys. But I mean, I think we can't go wrong with how Mahomes is playing. I'm pretty sure he has like 24 touchdowns and 1 interception for the whole season, like some crazy stat line like that. So I mean, obviously you can't go wrong with him. I think their defense is a concern. I mean, it showed yesterday how it was a big concern for the team. But yeah, I mean, I would say, I'd say Kansas City. And by the way, I mean 25 touchdowns and 1 interception, just to clarify that.
Not too shabby.
Yeah,
And I'm pretty sure also he hit his 100th career touchdown over the weekend as well in just his 40th NFL game or something, which is ridiculous.
yeah. He's just. I mean, it's only his third year in the NFL, and he's just showing how great he's already becoming in his early years in his the early years in his career.
Yeah, at that pace, he's going to become one of the all-time greats without a doubt.
Yeah, well, definitely. Yeah, I mean, he has a chance to win his second Super Bowl already this year, but we'll see. There's a lot of contenders out there, and it's tough to repeat as a Super Bowl champ, but we'll see. Um, moving to the NFC side, who would you say is the best from that conference?
I might not have said this going into last week, but I think after their big win against the Buccaneers, I'm going to go with the Saints. I think Drew Brees looks really good. The whole offense looks pretty good. And just beating a division rival like that was a big win for the Saints. And I think that's going to give them the confidence boost and sort of morale they need to sort of grind this out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I'm going with the Saints too. I think, I mean, we all, as I mentioned before, we all kind of had them under the radar. And going into this game, I think almost every single analyst out there picked Tampa Bay as the Saints showed on their Twitter page how everybody was picking against them yesterday. But yeah, I think right now I'd say the Saints too. I mean, you could also make a case for Seattle, although they did lose this past weekend. Green Bay also too, who won on Thursday against San Francisco, but of course San Francisco was depleted with injuries, and I mean it should have been a beatdown anyways. But yeah, I mean right now I'd say New Orleans, but between the three best in the NFC, which are all 6-2, the Green Bay Packers, the Seattle Seahawks, and Saints, it will be tough to see like who really becomes the best in the weeks to come.
And just because you haven't got one in yet, you're forgetting about the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, yeah, the best in the NFC East, right? I forgot.
Yeah, forgot our weekly NFC East shout out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the NFC East is just a complete disaster to say the least. I mean, luckily Philly didn't play this weekend, so they didn't have to have some kind of complete disastrous game. But of course, um,
Boys.
uh, Washington and the Giants faced off against each other, which I mean, there's not really any reason to discuss that game, or even Dallas, who's 2-7 now, losing against Pittsburgh. But yeah, it's just a bad division overall.
Anything else on NFL before we move on?
I think I'm good. If you want to bring up anything,
No, I think I'm good too. Which means we'll move on now to the MLS. Last night, which was October 8th for context, excuse me,
November.
Toronto FC finished the regular season with a 2-1 loss to the New York Red Bulls, which was another defeat. That's 3 losses in the last 4 games now, which isn't ideal, especially with a lot of the key players out at the moment. Josie Altidore and Jonathan Osorio made their returns to the lineup, but they're still missing Pablo Piatti, among many others. And Richie Larea went down in the first half of this one, which is just adding insult to injury, really, or injury to insult, I suppose. So Toronto seems to get back on track. They'll have a bye week, and they'll play one of Montreal, Impact, New England Revolution, Nashville, or Inter Miami, who will play a play-in round before they join the other MLS teams in the second round for the Eastern Conference. Speaking of Montreal, they scored a late winner against DC United to win 3-2 and book a playoff spot. As I'll mention in a second, they played the New England Revolution in the playoff round this week. And if they beat New England and Miami beat Nashville, then we'll get a Toronto FC versus Montreal Impact matchup.
Yeah, I mean that would be something to say for at least for Canadian soccer fans to see that as a first round matchup. But I mean, I guess I'll just mention about TFC. Like, I mean, I know they did struggle going into the later, or at least their last 4 games. As you mentioned, they lost 3 of the last 4 games, especially one of those key games against the Philadelphia Union. It was like a 5-0, 5-1 deficit or something like that. I think
5-0, yeah.
5-0. Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of I mean, that's kind of concerning for TFC, but I mean, as you mentioned, they do have a couple of injuries right now, so hopefully they'll be able to get some of their key players back, like Piatti and a couple of others, as you mentioned too. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a case of I think it kind of goes back to NFL with contenders looking like having bad games, and I
Yeah,
mean, TFC technically had a couple of bad games, especially the one against Philadelphia, who won the Supporters Shield.
yeah. And mentioned Supporter Shield. That's Philadelphia's first ever major trophies. Congrats to them. But also going back to TFC, like I think they played 5 home games this year. I think, and 3 of them were without fans against Montreal and Vancouver in that little weird Canadian thing they did. But
Mm-hmm.
other than that, they've been back here behind me here at Rensselaer Field in Hartford for much of the season and on the road pretty much the entire year, away from their families, away from whoever. So all credit to TFC for finishing second place in such a crazy season as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think all 3 Canadian teams are kind of in a tough situation, of course, with the border restrictions, and Montreal playing in New York, Vancouver playing in
Portland.
Portland, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, credit to all the 3 Canadian teams who were you know uh, kind of were staying away from the country and away from families, as you mentioned. But yeah, as you mentioned, the Eastern Conference play-in round starts next week. Do you want to give your prediction for the Impact, Revolution, and Nashville Miami game?
Starting with Montreal and New England, as much as I want to see TFC in Montreal, and as awesome as that would be from a fan's perspective, Montreal had a terrible end to the season, even worse than TFC had. Montreal lost 5 of their last 7 games, including a loss to New England among those 7 games. So I'm leaning toward New England for this one. Montreal won't go down without a fight. Thierry Henry's side looked very good in some parts of the match last night. It took a couple of late goals to actually earn the win, but at times they do look quite dangerous. They don't really have an out and out striker, which is a problem for them, but they won't go down without a fight. And although they will be missing Canadian midfielder Sam Piet, who misses out through red card suspension after a red card late in last night's match.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I just as you said, I think everything you brought up were great points. I think the Impact are in a tough situation, as you mentioned. I think for me, I'm gonna go with New England as well. And what about the battle of the expansion teams?
Yeah, Nashville versus Miami. I'm leaning towards Miami in this one. I know Nashville had the better record and weren't far off finishing for a first round bye. They're the top seed of the teams in the playing round. But I'm still leaning towards Miami. They just have so many game changes on their team, including their star signing Gonzalo Higuain and his brother Federico Higuain as well. They're sort of teaming up in Miami, and they've been pretty good since the 2 brothers have joined them. They also have Rodolfo Pizarro and Blaise Matuidi, who have been some of the better players in MLS since they've arrived. So they're on form. They're a very, very dangerous team in attack. Um, but on the other hand, for Nashville, Walker Zimmerman has been one of the best defenders in the league once again in his first year with Nashville, and I imagine he might be certainly a contender. And I imagine might win the MLS Best Defender of the Year award. So he's definitely capable of stopping those Miami attackers. We'll have to just wait and see how this one plays out. But I'm leaning towards Miami's attack more than Nashville's defense.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I think this is I think just looking at 2 expansion teams facing off each other in a play-in round is just I mean, it's going to be a great game, I think. I mean, I think it's I think it's tougher to predict than the Revolution Impact game, just because both I think Nashville had a pretty good ending to the season. I mean, they've had like just looking at their schedule, they've only had like one loss and a couple of decisions and a couple of wins going into the end of the season. So I mean, they did have somewhat of a strong end. Um, I think I'm gonna say, just because just to go on opposite ends of this and just to tie break this for one of us to tie break this prediction thing. At least I'll say Nashville just for that.
fair enough.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then,
and just oh,
sorry,
sorry.
as I mentioned, TFC will play the lower seed. Sorry, the higher seed, I believe, of the uh, remaining play-in round teams. So as I mentioned earlier, if Montreal beats New England and Miami beats Nashville, then it'd be TFC versus Montreal in a couple weeks' time, which would be pretty exciting.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think it would be a great thing for Canadian soccer for that to be a matchup again, like at least in the playoffs. Like but
Montreal's
yeah,
first playoff, Montreal's first playoff game, I believe, since they lost to TFC in 2016 when TFC beat them to get onto the 2016 MLS Cup final.
yeah, and we all know how that exciting that round was a couple of years ago. But
That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, if you haven't watched those highlights of that game yet, I strongly recommend you search them up. Like TFC won, I think 7-5 on aggregate with a couple of crazy late goals,
yeah,
and that's one of the best. The second leg of that series is one of the best matches I've ever had the pleasure of watching.
yeah. Definitely crazy times that year.
Um, Moving on now to the NBA. It's been sort of learned the last couple of days that the NBA Players Association has agreed to start the season on December 22nd with a 72 game schedule and one of the shortest off season in North American sports. Matthew, first off, what do you think of the decision to start a couple of days before Christmas?
I mean, I think I think looking at the financial side of it, I think it was the right thing to do. I mean, I think that someone like somewhere online it was mentioned that like if they started after Christmas, there would be like some big financial issues or something for the NBA. So I think it's reasonable for them to start now. I think though it is kind of a tight off season for at least for the Lakers and Heat. And I think I pretty sure I saw LeBron online like reacting on Instagram with like his like the an emoji like just like in like why are we starting so early? But I mean, I think I think it's great that we're just going to be getting Christmas games. I think that's all the NBA. I think the NBA really like just really wanted fans back in stadiums. But of course, with the ongoing situation with COVID, and I think the U.S. getting like 100,000 plus a day now, past couple of days. I think they just want to go on and start before Christmas so that they can get their money at least, or at least their revenue.
Yeah, I think Christmas games are going to be a pretty big factor in that. Like, I think for the time I watch the most basketball that aren't Raptors games is Christmas. I watch as many games as I can over those couple of days. Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, that kind of stretch. As many games as I can. So I imagine a lot of fans are the same way, especially overseas as well. Um, so I imagine that they definitely want to get those Christmas games as a priority, and having the season start on those days as well. The start of a season is always exciting. So to combine the two could make for an amazing. There won't be any fans probably, but for a TV product, it's going to be incredible probably.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's just going to be. I think it's going to be great for, as you mentioned, for fans to be watching a tradition. Of course, Christmas games are a tradition for the NBA. I think that they can't really stop that, especially considering, that they took a 4 month break this year and then they came back for I think it was like from late July to October, or at least for the Lakers and Heat, it was for until October. So, I mean, there are a couple of teams that haven't played since March. There's like 8 teams that didn't get invited to the bubble that haven't played for like 9 months or so. So, yeah, I think it's just like they came into an agreement saying like we need, Christmas games for the season, and yeah, they just came up to that agreement, and with a reasonable 72 game schedule too. I think they want to finish before the Olympics, so that was worked out well.
Yeah, I think I heard that NBC has the rights to the Olympics, and they wanted to make sure that the season was done before the scheduled start of the Olympics. Anyway, if the Olympics go ahead, there's another another story completely. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's definitely the thinking behind the 72 games. What do you think of the 72 game schedule? Do you think that's the right decision, or do you wish they kind of crammed in those extra 10?
I mean, I think it's fine. Like, I don't think having an 82 game schedule is like not gonna. I don't think it's gonna hurt them to play 10 less games. I mean, last season they didn't play. I don't even think they got to. They didn't even get to 82 games, of course, because they only had 8 regular season games in the bubble for the 22 teams that made it in, like at least like made the cut to the NBA bubble. So I think it's I don't think 10 games is going to hurt them, but 10 less games is going to hurt. But yeah, I think it's a reasonable schedule.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also coming up in the NBA in 9 days from now, November 18th is the NBA draft. The Minnesota Timberwolves have the number one pick again this year. Who do you think should be the number one pick in this year's draft?
I mean, you mentioned. I mean, we mentioned that there's LaMelo Ball, there's James Wiseman, Anthony Edwards for the that are contenders for the top pick in the draft. I think Timberwolves, who have the first overall pick, should go with LaMelo. I know he did play. I'm pretty sure he played in Australia. He didn't play in the NCAA, so he kind of got more experience in the Australian league. So I think having said that, and just with his overall game, I think I'll say Lamelo.
Yeah, I agree with Lamelo. I think there's some questions about his sort of competitiveness maybe, or like on defense. He's kind of his commitment rather than competitive. Sorry, commitment seems to have been questioned sometimes. Um, but at the same time, he's obviously very talented. He obviously has the ability to score a ton of points. He scored 100 points in a game this year, 1 point if I'm not mistaken, or something around there. And he's obviously going to be in that conversation for number one pick. But also think the second best player available from the limited highlights and research I've done into it is James Wiseman. I think of all the players, people seem to think he's the highest upside of any player in this draft, uh, even LaMelo. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went the Wiseman route as well. But I think LaMelo is probably a safe pick.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to mention too. The unfortunate thing about this draft is like we wouldn't have been able to see a couple of these players in the NCAA tournament
Yeah,
because, of course, it was canceled in March. So I mean, it is unfortunate that whoever is in like 10 to 15 or 20 spot, like in the best available category for the draft, is not able to you know build themselves up more. But I mean, yeah, that's a pretty unfortunate thing, I would say.
yeah, that's definitely a place. Right, most of my uh, college basketball research comes from watching that tournament.
Yeah.
So I've just kind of been following along with what other analysts are saying on like the Athletic or ESPN or whatever. Um, so I think with that in mind, Lamelo Ball and Wiseman are sort of my top two for my personal sort of opinion on it.
Yeah, same here. Anything else on the NBA before we move on to our last topic?
No, I don't think so. But please keep in mind though that the news is hopefully going to start picking up with the draft and free agency and all that good stuff. So the Raptors are going to have an interesting off season, I think. So we'll definitely try to cover that as much as we can.
Yeah,
A lot to be decided still.
yeah, we'll definitely talk about like potential, where they might play if they don't get to play in Toronto
Yeah.
this season, and yeah, we'll bring that all up when the news comes in the next couple episodes, hopefully. Um, but moving on to our final topic, and a league who hasn't officially agreed to a starting date is the NHL. Yes, as I mentioned, that they did have they did say they want to start on January 1st. I don't know if they're gonna agree on that yet, at least for the Players Association. What do you think? When do you think the NHL should start, and should they play less games than 82?
I don't think they're going to start on January 1st, to be honest. I think that's still a bit soon. I think I heard also at February 1st was another date I heard thrown around on Twitter. I think that's more likely. I'd be surprised though if players aren't in training camps by the end of January or very early February. I'd be surprised. I think we're looking at like start of February or middle of February. I think. And as for the less games, I think if you hopefully want to have the 2021-22 season start around the right time, around October, November, I think you ideally don't go deep into the summer like they did this year. So I think probably we'll see a season that obviously ends later than usual, but I think will be condensed into 72 games or maybe even less than that. But I think 72 is probably the number they're going to go for, like the NBA is doing, with a view to ending it earlier for a longer off season and hopefully get back on the sort of regular schedule, if you will, for the following season.
Yeah, I don't think the NHL would want to like put themselves in a situation like the NBA where they would have to have like a 70 something day off season. Like I mean, the NBA off season, as we mentioned, is pretty tight as it is. But I think with the NHL, they should. I think they should consider starting in late January, and probably play like less, like 60 to 70 games. Um, depending on the scheduling with how far they would go potentially into July. And we also mentioned that NBC wants to have the Olympics like start on time, but like as we mentioned, the NBA wants to start before the Olympics, and also NBC has the NHL rights too, like for the Stanley Cup and all that stuff. So I'm pretty sure they want to finish before the Olympics too. But yeah, I think in regards to like how many games they should start and play, I think they should start late January with like 60 to 70, depending on what kind of scheduling that brings.
Yeah, I agree. I think 60, 62 or 72. Maybe I think if you bring back the same playoff format that they had this year with the play-in rounds, which I was a big fan of. I didn't like it at first, but in the end, I kind of warmed up to it. I think they should probably do that again, at least for one more year, because it was sort of a way of maybe condensing it a little bit more. Um, so I think 60. You said 60 to 70 games with that playoff format. I think is probably ideal to get it done by the Olympics, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and also another issue that the NHL is dealing with is the border restrictions, of course, with the Canada-U.S. border, of course, which I think now it's like till November, like that it's closed, but it might be extended again depending how the situation with COVID in the U.S. Goes on. But how do you think the league should handle these restrictions, and do you think that there should be a like a possible Canadian division?
Well, I think it's very unlikely we're going to see fans in NHL arenas next season. Because a lot of people say and same with NBA. Like I think a lot of people say that the arenas are kind of like a breeding ground for the virus. There's no open air, it's just ventilation systems, just like blowing the air around,
Mhm.
and therefore blowing germs around if someone has COVID. So I'd be very surprised to see fans. So with that in mind, I don't think teams would be 100% against relocating for a full year. Although that again depends on arena availability. Would they share an arena with another team, maybe, or they just find maybe an AHL affiliate arena or something like. But I personally would prefer to see the Canadian division with all 7 Canadian teams playing among each other for this. I only want that for 1 year though. Like I don't want that as a long term thing. But as a solution to COVID, I think that'd be amazing. I think seeing the Leafs play Montreal, seeing the Leafs play some of the West Coast teams we see less often, and getting all these teams playing each other a lot and pretty much exclusively, I think that'd be really good.
Yeah, I mean, at least I feel like, I mean, they could also do like what the MLS has been like. What the MLS did at the beginning of returning to the regular season was sticking to just Canada only, and then of course as we know TFC moved to Connecticut, and that they were playing home games there. But I think with the NHL, maybe they can start out the. I mean, we obviously we don't know how the situation with COVID is going to evolve in the next 2 months or so whenever the NHL starts, but I think maybe they can start out with staying in Canada. As I mentioned, all 7 teams playing against each other, and then maybe depending on the border restrictions and everything else that's in their that is potentially potentially in their way. I think maybe they can uh, some Canadian teams, as you mentioned, can relocate to AHL affiliate arenas. But yeah, it all depends on how COVID is evolved at the time, and if there's like a vaccine, which might not come until like mid 2021. But yeah, we'll just have to see, I guess.
Yeah, I think like traditionally, like in an 82 game regular NHL season, teams play other teams in their division like 4 or 5 times, usually for like a pretty good chunk of their season. So maybe they could do is like you mentioned, kind of start the season with the Canadian division, play let's say it's a 62 game season, play like 3 games against each other Canadian team for what is it, like 18 games, and then see how maybe reevaluate, see how it's looking, the COVID situation is looking, and then maybe like you said, like relocate or maybe play cross border. But I don't think we're playing cross border over the next season.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it'll be tough for them to figure out what to do, and I don't think they want to play in a bubble either. I don't think they want
No.
to have those kind of restrictions again. But yeah, we'll have to see.
Although maybe a bubble for just the Canadian teams wouldn't be the worst thing. Like in
Yeah,
Edmonton, maybe let's say where they're already going to be setting up a bubble for the World Juniors. So let's say the World Juniors start in was it Boxing Day or is it Christmas Day?
Christmas Day actually.
So they'll be done probably by the time the NHL starts. It should be done in theory. So then maybe the NHL could just move to Edmonton for all the Canadian teams and have a 17 bubble there, sort of restrict travel and sort of limit the possibility of an outbreak on a team.
Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't mind that. I think we already had a bubble season with Edmonton, Toronto, but yeah, well, or at least for until COVID came and they had to force bubbles in place. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind that happening.
And I think the bubble in Edmonton and Toronto are both good for TV product as well. Like I think that's what they prioritize with those fans is prioritize the TV product side of it and
Mhm.
having like the banners in the crowd to like cover the empty seats and stuff like, and that worked really well for the NHL.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
Anything else on NHL?
No, I don't have anything, but yeah, as we mentioned with the NBA, if there's any potential start date in mind or any confirmation, we'll bring it to you on the sidelines.
Anything else for the everything else in the video overall?
I'm good with everything else. Yeah.
Awesome, me too. Which means that's the end of episode 16 of On the Sidelines. Thank you as always for watching. I'm Benedict Rhodes.
I'm Matthew Limberti.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. And we'll see you next time.